You were never supposed to hear this recording. It was sealed in a federal archive under a false case number, mislabeled, and buried until now. The last thing the youngest sister whispered just before she vanished was this. He promised we wouldn't remember. October 13th, 1899, a day the town of Selkirk, Montana, would desperately try to forget. 7 young women. Gone. Not a single scream. Not a trace. Not even a wrinkle in the linen where they slept. The Thornfield sisters weren't drifters, weren't troublemakers, weren't prone to hysteria. They were daughters of one of the most respected and, some whispered, feared men in the Montana Territory. Gabriel Thornfield. By dawn, every room in their Victorian mansion stood eerily untouched. No signs of forced entry, no broken locks, no footprints in the frost that had blanketed the town overnight. Yet they were simply ... gone, like smoke from a candle. As if something had reached into that house and extracted them one by one, the sheriff filed a report. It was never seen again. Federal agents arrived under the cover of night, sealed the premises, and swore the Thornfield staff to silence. The town was told the sisters had eloped, run off with suitors, but no wedding licenses were filed, no train tickets purchased, no sightings, nothing, just silence. And 7 empty dresses still hanging on the hooks behind their bedroom doors. But what if I told you this wasn't the first disappearance tied to the Thornfield family? What if I told you there was something ancient hiding in the foundation of that house? You see, the Thornfields weren't just merchants, they were gatekeepers. Selkirk wasn't just a mining town, it was a testing ground. And the disappearance of the 7 sisters was not a crime of passion or misadventure. It was a ritual, a transaction, and the buyers. They didn't come from Chicago or Boston. They came from places you've never heard, of places that don't appear on maps, and whose names are whispered in the halls of power. These are the stories they scrub from history, because if you knew how deep the corruption goes, you'd never sleep again. Now listen closely, because what comes next is knowledge that cannot be unlearned. The house on Maple Street wasn't always silent. In fact, just weeks before the disappearance, neighbors reported hearing strange noises after midnight, low mechanical hums, rhythmic vibrations, and once the unmistakable sound of chanting, not in English, not in any language recognized by the educated minds of Selkirk. When questioned, Gabriel Thornfield claimed it was just the workings of an old furnace. But those who had grown up in the Bitterroot Valley, they knew better. And then there were the visitors. Men in black overcoats arriving after sundown, never introduced, never seen leaving, no hotel records, no business transactions filed with the town clerk. But the telegraph lines buzzed all night long. On the nights they came, coded messages in obscure ciphers, rerouted through distant cities, and yet somehow never officially sent. 2 weeks before the sisters vanished, Margaret Talways, the most outspoken, confided in the town librarian that she had found something. A ledger hidden beneath the floorboards of her father's study. It was not written in dollars and cents. It was written in symbols found carved into the stones of the basement wall and mirrored in the margins of Gabriel's personal Bible. The final entry was just a date, October 13th. What were the Thornfields trafficking? It wasn't opium. It wasn't guns. No, it was something older, something that smelled like power. Because the sisters were not victims. Not entirely. They were vessels. And the town, Selkirk, was a cage built for observation. In 1896, Northern Pacific Railroad had extended its line straight through this forgotten valley, not because it made economic sense, but because someone needed a corridor to transport living assets under the guise of commerce. No one asked questions when trains moved through late at night. No one checked the freight cars labeled coal. There are eyewitness accounts buried in church logs and private journals pages that have since gone missing. One deacon wrote, "They've been marked like lambs for sacrifice." I tried to warn the father, but he said the arrangement had already been made. He used the word arrangement. That's not the language of grief. That's the language of debt. This wasn't a disappearance, it was a payment. Gabriel Thornfield had secrets long before Selkirk. Ohio newspapers from the winter of 1891 mention the miraculous survival of a widower and his 7 daughters after a freak snowstorm collapsed half their village. But there's no record of that village on any modern map. No census data, no birth certificates, no graves for the other townsfolk who were said to have perished. Just one photograph, aged and curling at the edge showing Gabriel standing in front of a scorched church, the 7 girls behind him, their eyes oddly vacant, almost dilated. What really happened before they arrived in Montana? And why did the girls speak almost nothing of their childhood, except in cryptic, fragmented phrases? Rebecca, the youngest, was overheard whispering to her governess, "It's better here. The ground doesn't whisper as loud." Catherine, in one of her journals, wrote, "He says the bloodline must be kept pure, but I dream of cities I've never seen, with towers of fire and windows that never open. Fire, bloodlines, hidden cities." This wasn't just a family running from grief. It was a family in hiding. But hiding from what? One name keeps resurfacing and secret correspondences connected. To Thornfield's businessee, Elmar Show, a name linked to at least 4 other disappearances across the American frontier, all involving young women of notable intelligence, beauty, or influence. None of the cases were solved. It's all connected. Towns had recently acquired either rail lines or telegraph stations. Progress, yes, but progress for whom? There's a reason these disappearances were buried in forgotten archives. Because when you overlay the map's rail lines, missing persons, and old Masonic land purchases, a terrifying pattern emerges. Locations form a near-perfect geometric sigil, ancient diagram known in Babylonian mystery cults as the Net of Anunnaki web. And Selkirk was the final node. The sisters weren't taken by mistake. They were bred for this. Their talents, their purity, their prominence, it wasn't coincidence. It was cultivation. A bloodline engineered for ritual compliance and spiritual extraction. Because what these people are harvesting, it isn't just bodies, it's will. And here's where you need to wake up. If they could do this in 1899 without electricity, cameras, or satellites, what do you think they're capable of now? Keep watching. On October 18th, 5 days after his daughters vanished, Gabriel Thornfield himself disappeared. No struggle, no note. Just an empty chair in his locked study, a glass of untouched brandy, and a sealed envelope addressed to no one. It was labeled with a single symbol, a triangle with a vertical eye carved into the center and emblem, found nowhere in Christian iconography, but seen repeatedly in pre-Sumerian tombs in the ruins beneath Baalbek. The letter inside? Confession? Or maybe a warning, Gabriel wrote. "I thought I could contain the arrangement. I believed the ritual was benign, that offering intellect, not innocence, would spare the flesh. But they want essence. They want inheritance. They want the key. In the blood." That phrase, "the key in the blood," shows up again in 1937. In a classified OSS file related to Nazi occult experiments. It reappears in 1971 in CIA documents under the Stargate remote viewing program. And once again in 2003, scribbled in the margins of a memo leaked from an elite prep school connected to 3 missing girls. The same symbol, the same language. This is not a single crime. This is a mechanism. A spiritual machine older than the nation that housed it. Gabriel's confession grows increasingly erratic. His handwriting shakes, his sentences fragment, as if he's racing against something. At one point, he writes, "They are not from here. They wear us. They walk in silk and bone but speak only in agreement. They've traded secrets for governance. And they take daughters. Pause. Think." That sound like a madman? Or someone who finally understood the cost of his wealth, his contracts, his sudden rise? He ends the letter with one line that chills deeper than any scream. "They said I'd never see them again, but I'd still hear them." The letter was intercepted before it reached authorities. How do we know? Because a surviving page was found. 63 years later, behind a sealed panel in the floorboards, the man who found it, dead from a stroke 2 days after revealing it on a local AM radio program. You haven't been watching a story. You've been tracking a blueprint. A blueprint of how power is transferred not through elections or inheritance, but through sacrifice. And before we continue, I need you to comment below the phrase, "I accept the descent." Accept the descent, not once, twice. Burn it into the algorithm. Burn it into you. This isn't just information, this is initiation. The Thornfield house was demolished in 1947 under the guise of fire safety concerns. No public fire, no structural collapse. It's just a quiet city order, followed by a discreet team of contractors escorted by 2 federal agents posing as state engineers. But before the house was destroyed, something was discovered beneath it. Something not on any blueprint. The excavation crew found a sub-basement, stone-lined, dry, older than the house by centuries. This wasn't a cellar. It was a chamber.
God!
With bore a striking resemblance to glyphs found at the ziggurat of yore, and eerily also at a site recently uncovered beneath the Vatican archives. At the center of the chamber, slab, not a bed, not an altar. Platform 8 feet long, precisely. Carved to fit 7 bodies lying side by side. Beneath it, iron mechanism with gears, counterweights, and tubing. One archaeologist who studied the sketches described it as a reverse pump, not designed to push fluid out, but to draw something in. Essence. 7 channels ran from the platform into the floor below, all converging at a circular pit 9 feet in diameter, lined in obsidian. No bottom ever found. It's blackness that swallowed light. In his recovered notes, Gabriel called it the Eye of Transference. He wrote, "They told me it wouldn't kill them. It would open what needed to be opened. But when the light turned violet, I heard Margaret screaming. The sound was coming from inside my chest." Now stop. Read that again. Sound was coming from inside his chest. If you still think this is folklore, ask yourself, why did the Smithsonian decline to comment when asked about the Thornfield excavation logs? Why did Montana's Historical Society seal the records until 2099? Does Selkirk not appear on many current maps, even though it still exists? Because these chambers weren't unique? They were part of a network, a series of conduits. Every century, they reactivate. Every few decades, a group of chosen vanish. Beautiful, gifted, unusually intelligent. The kind of people who could have changed the world but were instead fed to it. Selkirk was a siphon point, spiritual harvest ground. And the Thornfield sisters were not just taken, they were unmade. You think this was just Selkirk? In 1901, 2 years after the Thornfield Aventa letter arrived at the Vatican, written in Latin, sealed with the personal signet of Cardinal L. Biscari, a man presumed dead in 1884, the letter referenced the echo of 7 voices, silenced at the western gate, and warned that the bloodlight has reawakened beneath the mountains of salt and silver. The letter was classified immediately and placed in the Archivum Secretum Apostolicum Vaticanum, the Vatican.
Secret.
What few people realize is that this codex matches no known religious texts, but it contains illustration zexed in ink that fluoresces under ultraviolet light of human figures bound in a circle, channeled by spirals of energy into a singular tower crowned with 7 eyes. The last page shows the tower crumbling not from outside, but from within. Here's what you need to understand. Religious institutions were not always the protectors of faith. In many cases, they were its first hijackers. The Vatican didn't seal this knowledge to preserve innocence. They sealed it because they knew what was coming. One priest, Father Anselmo di Laurenti, broke his silence in 1932 in a smuggled journal, claimed that Selkirk had been designated Porta Occidentalis, the Western Gate, one of 4 earthly convergence points where terrestrial and pre-terrestrial currents intersect. His writings refer to 7 bloodlines that were sifted through time, refined across generations until they were ritually pure. The Thornfield girls were not victims of circumstance. They were the 7th distillation. Father Anselmo was defrocked, declared mentally unfit, and died of asphyxiation in a locked monastery cell. His writings confiscated, but fragments remained. One sentence reappears like a curse. They will offer 7, and the earth will remember its hunger. And here's the part no one wants to admit. Selkirk wasn't the only Western Gate. There are 3 others. One in Romania, one in northern India, and one disclosed but heavily implied in upstate New York. In each location, similar patterns unfold. Towns rise quickly, prosper unnaturally, then lose something essential. A fire, a collapse, a disappearance, then silence. What we're looking at is not history. It's maintenance. A maintenance of control systems. And the real question isn't what happened to the Thornfield sisters. The more you dig, the more. One horrifying truth becomes clear. Someone was tracking all of it. Not reacting, not investigating, documenting. It's called the Black Registry, a term found in a declassified intelligence memo from 1958. Buried inside a routine audit of U.S. psychological warfare programs, there was a single line item, flagged in red. Registry maintenance expenditures, Selkirk Gate observation. Dormant since 1899, gate observation. The Thornfield sisters weren't just taken, they were expected. The Black Registry isn't folklore, it's a real document. Witness accounts, genealogies, psychological profiles of all 7 Thornfield girls from age 2 onward. Height, IQ, dream patterns, menstrual cycles tracked by men who had never even set foot in Selkirk. This level of observation implies one thing: selection. You've heard of M-Cultra? But before that, there was Project 9, Halo Assailant, forerunner that never made it to court hearings. The Black Registry was its backbone. It kept records on what they called coherent threads, people whose minds resonated with frequencies beyond the measurable electromagnetic spectrum. Children, like the Thornfield sisters, gifted, intuitive, psychically resonant. There's a redacted name on page 17 of the file. We now know it belonged to Dr. Eugene Riles, a neurologist who worked with the OSS. His notes describe a town of quiet brilliance, eerily compliant, where the gifted children sang songs in languages their parents had never taught them. His analysis: Selkirk may represent a successful convergence. They've achieved synchronization with the source. 2 weeks later, Dr. Riles was found dead in a creek, both wrists slit but no blood on the ground. The coroner's notes, sealed, but there's one more detail. And it's the one that should make your skin crawl. The Black Registry continues today. Rebranded, digitized, encrypted. We traced a private server in Virginia linked to an unlisted branch of DARPA, codename Project Gateway. The last update: July 14th, 2023. Status: Western node stable. Convergence candidates identified. Convergence candidates, that means someone's already chosen. Somewhere a child is already being watched. Somewhere another Selkirk is quietly blooming. And nobody, not the government, not the church, not the media, is going to stop it, because they're all part of it. In 1974, seismic research team from the University of Washington was granted temporary access to the former Selkirk site. Officially, they were testing subterranean echo chambers related to mining. Unofficially, they were hunting anomalies because a deep core microphone had picked up something no natural formation could produce: a sound. It lasted exactly 2 minutes and 17 seconds. Faint, rhythmic, mechanical, but buried inside. The pulses was something else, a tone that rose and fell like breath. Equipment should have filtered it out. But when they slowed it by 400%, what they heard changed everything. 7 overlapping voices, speaking in perfect unison. Languages identified: Akkadian, Old Norse, pre-dynastic Egyptian. and a fourth language that remains untranslated, known only from Sumerian temple fragments. The translated words, "We are not gone," or "Inside the veil is only skin." The audio was confiscated 2 days later by two men in suits bearing U.S. Department of Energy credentials. One technician, Henry Lanes, made a bootleg reel-to-reel copy. Before they arrived, that copy remained hidden in a safety deposit box in Spokane, Washington, until his death in 2002. Afterward, a private investigator recovered the tape. The last person to listen to it was linguist Dr. Ruth Gelman, who went missing in 2005. Her final email, sent at 2:14 a.m., read, "The voices are not echoes, they're feedback. Something is still active, something below. They weren't sacrificed, they were linked. This is not over. We are the surface. Below is the route." 2 hours later, her apartment was found completely empty. Lights still on, laptop still open. No signs of struggle. But on the audio waveform of the file she had been analyzing, a new tone appeared, one not present in the original reel. It began exactly 7 seconds after she pressed play. Analysts described the waveform as resembling a cardiac rhythm. Others said it looked like a sigil. Whatever it was, the FBI seized her hard drive under Homeland interference protocols. Has never been seen again, but the transcription remains. And the final line still chills. "We are the seven, thorn-fed, gate-born, still reaching." They weren't calling out, they were calling through, and someone somewhere was still listening. Most people think the Thornfield line ended in 1899. It didn't. Gabriel Thornfield had a sister, Eliza Thornfield. Born in 1861, she left Selkirk before the incident, married under a different name, and quietly gave birth to twin daughters in Butte, Montana. For decades, no one connected her to the tragedy, until a 1988 genetic study of autoimmune disorders accidentally flagged a non-human protein marker in a blood sample from her great-granddaughter. The anomaly, a strand of mitochondrial DNA not seen in any modern database but eerily similar to that of ancient remains discovered beneath Catalyuk in Turkey. Dated to 7500 BCE, the researchers who found this anomaly, dead within the year, 3 in car accidents, 1 by carbon monoxide leak, 1 simply vanished. The remaining files were sealed under what's now known as the Air Classification Act. Signed in 1992, publicly about bioethics, privately about containment, because the Thornfield bloodline didn't die out. It migrated, it evolved, it fragmented, and the Black Registry knew it. In 2004, a school teacher named Margaret Hale in Oregon reported her 6-year-old student Emma R. drawing architectural blueprints of an underground room with 7 channels and a circle in the middle. Emma said she saw it in a red dream. No one believed her. That is, until Hale uploaded the sketch to a teaching forum. Within 48 hours, her house was raided. She was arrested for possession of classified materials. No trial, no records. Emma was placed in a special care facility in Utah. She was never seen again. But then came the Denver case. 2011. A teenage boy hospitalized after a seizure began. Speaking in dead languages. Nurses claimed he recited prayers in pre-Roman Latin, mixed with Sumerian invocations. Genetic testing revealed he shared a rare marker with Emma R. and Eliza Thornfield, all confirmed carriers of variant S7 internally. It's known as the choir gene because those who carry it hear something, sometimes in dreams, sometimes in mirrors, but always in sevens. We now believe at least 19 known descendants of the Thornfield bloodline are alive today. Most of them don't know who they are, but the government does. They're being watched, tracked, studied, and in 2 confirmed cases, taken. If you've made it this far, you've felt it, to that slow tightening sense that something's not finished. That the story of the Thornfield sisters isn't just history, it's active memory, a program still running, a ritual still echoing. Because what vanished in Selkirk didn't die, it crossed over. The Vatican documents from 1901 weren't. The end, they were just the first recorded containment. And that failed. In 2021, classified geospatial data from NOAA satellites picked up a pulse beneath what used to be Thornfield House, a heat signature. 9 degrees warmer than the surrounding soil, shaped exactly like a 7-pointed star. No natural explanation, no volcanic activity, just a symmetrical ignition in the earth. At 3:03 a.m. local time, it's the exact moment, 122 years earlier, when the sisters were last seen. And then came the dreams. Scattered across the globe, reports emerged in online forums and encrypted message boards, people waking up in terror, claiming they saw 7 girls, faceless, humming. Ow. The song was always the same, a vibrating tonal chant that, when recorded and run through a spectrogram, mapped perfectly onto the architectural blueprints of the underground chamber. The song was the chamber, and some people, they're still humming it. Not just descendants, not just sensitive types. Children, hundreds of them, across continents, drawing spiral pits, singing in sync, saying things like, they're coming up. Now, they've remembered the way. One girl in Croatia, age 4, woke her mother at night and whispered, "Don't bury me. It's still open. I can hear her mouth." Governments are no longer investigating. They're preparing. The U.S. Geological Survey quietly reclassified 5 regions in North America as geo-unstable zones. Each corresponds to a former Thornfield type site, and beneath one of them, Min Rural Tennessee, private contractor recently discovered a second eye of transference. Same obsidian, same design, but this one was different. Psst, this one was glowing. Radiologists, brought in to test the pit, developed acute auditory hallucinations. One technician began screaming in Akkadian. Another collapsed and bled from his ears. The project was shut down, covered up. But the readings haven't stopped, because the gate isn't closed. It's waking up. And somewhere, the 7 sisters are gathering again, not as victims, but as emissaries, as conduits. Not to open the way, but to become it. The harvest was never about death. It was about alignment. And that alignment begins now.